Welcome to the Unforeseen Journey podcast with myself, Glenn Oliver. The intention of this podcast is to dig into my experiences of what is commonly referred to as the midlife crisis. I want to share with you my own journey as I unpick the why behind the what, in the hope that through these conversations it helps you to live a more intentional and fulfilling life. In the show, I want to share with you why I believe this is something we should all be talking about way more, in the hope that others who go through this are supported and able to navigate this incredibly challenging time in their lives. Thank you for taking the time to listen.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Unforeseen Journey podcast. I think this is episode 9 now, and this is the first episode where it's more than just me talking to the camera. So bit of nerves today with going through this process and having someone on to speak, but I think it's a great opportunity, and I couldn't be more excited to have Pat here with us today to talk through some of the things that I've covered in some of the previous episodes and to share his thoughts on it. So an introduction to Pat. Pat is a psychologist. I'll let him introduce himself formally in a minute, but to me, he came into my life some years ago as a member of the gym. He signed up when we were a CrossFit gym, and he was there as part of all the transition and the changes that we went through at that time. And I don't know, I can't actually remember the point at which it happened that I really became aware of what Pat did. For a while, Pat was just a guy working out in the gym. And then for something kind of happened, there was a shift and there was a conversation, and without overstating it too much, the last few years, Pat has been incredibly supportive and helpful, and has helped me navigate this incredibly kind of challenging period, if you want to call it that, for me. And so I'm forever indebted to him for him and his help and his guidance and his mentorship and coaching. So it felt like the right way to kick off speaking to someone else on this podcast was to speak to Pat, because he's been so instrumental in my own journey, and I'm really excited for him to speak to you as someone who listens to this. So that's it. So without further ado, welcome Pat. Thanks for coming on today.
Thank you, Glenn.
So just I introduced you a bit there, but it'd be great for people to hear a bit about you, where you come from, kind of a bit of your background, if that'd be okay.
Absolutely. Well, as you said, I'm a psychologist. I recently celebrated my 40th anniversary as a psychologist, which to me seems a little bit surreal, but it's also a very pleasant knowledge and piece of information. And I'm still working and still loving it. As far as I'm concerned, I've got the best job in the world. Originally, as you may detect from my accent, I am Scottish. I grew up and lived for the first part of my life in Glasgow. And then in the late 1980s, I moved down to the southeast, specifically to study and train at the University of Surrey, who at that time had what I considered to be the premier training in humanistic psychology, which is the branch of psychology that I am particularly attached to. And I stayed down here. I've now lived down in the southeast of England for more years than I ever lived in Scotland. People keep saying, why don't you change your accent? Or, no, sorry, what they say is, you've still got your accent. Of course I've still got my accent. That was sort of hardwired and embedded from a very young age. Anyway, over the intervening time frame, I've worked with individuals, groups and teams, within organisations, training courses I've designed and run myself to teach people to be humanistic psychologists, and everything in between. I also have a fairly thriving practice on one-to-one existential coaching with my clients. And as I said at the start, I love my job.
That's great. Thanks, Pat. Yeah, something you've just said it there. Your title as an existential life coach. I remember we had a coffee the other week, and I was talking through some of my own pain points of going from maybe being what I'd say is a fitness coach into a life coach, and the connotations around that. So can you just explain like the title existential life coach and what that means?
Yes. One of the reasons why I was attracted to humanistic psychology in the first place is that it is fundamentally existential. That means it deals with what's happening in the now. Other approaches tend to adopt a historic or looking backwards approach, and in their own way, they are extremely effective. Uh, my contention is that whatever is going on for us in our heads is happening in the here and now, and the best place to work with these issues is in the here and now. It can be fruitful to look at where the issues perhaps originated from, but I have found over the years, certainly in my own case, that dealing with what's happening right here, right now, has the most leverage in terms of helping me to understand myself, my life, and my world.
Yeah, that makes sense and resonates with me as well. I think share some of my own experiences of the therapeutic journey, or whatever you want to call it. I think I've been through a number of cycles of kind of therapy over the years, and some of it I've found beneficial, others I haven't. But like you, I kind of got to a point with it, kind of going, well, I'm aware that all this stuff has kind of happened now, and I kind of felt, I don't know if that was just the way that the traditional model is, but it was just always focused on the past, and I felt like, well, when does that awareness of the past then translate into like tangible things that you can do now? And that was one of my frustrations of it, really. So let's get started on this. So, as you well know, that my life for the last few years has been a bit of a bumpy ride, and I'm labeling it as this period of the last few years of maybe I've gone through something what would traditionally be called like a midlife crisis, and that I've kind of reevaluated and re-questioned, really looked at everything I've done in life and made some big sweeping decisions around what I'm doing and what I want to do moving forward. Maybe let's just start with what are your thoughts on the name of that, and the naming of the midlife crisis and where it comes from.
I don't actually know where the term comes from. I've never researched it that far back, but it almost sounds like an excuse. Oh, he or she is having a midlife crisis. If we wait for long enough, they'll get over it and they'll sort themselves out. Sometimes the exhortations are a bit more stringent or strident, like pull yourself together and get on with stuff. But actually, my take on the so-called midlife crisis is that I think everybody, or almost everybody, reaches a time in their lives, and I'm sure it varies from person to person, where they realise that they're not here forever. And maybe something existential happens that causes them to think about, am I on the path that I want to be? Now, recently, the thing that happened, I think, to everybody, to a greater or lesser extent, certainly affected everyone, was the COVID pandemic. And many people, because of the constraints that were placed upon them, working from home and so on and so forth, and having and hopefully surviving the disease, or the virus, I should say, and perhaps even having to deal with the loss of their nearest and dearest and or other loved ones, that's caused people, in my experience, certainly the people I work with, to say, am I on the right path? Am I actually doing what I want to do with my life? Nobody really knows how much time they've got left. And people, I think, are waking up to the fact that I am responsible for my life into the future, what's left of it, in a highly positive, not a maudlin way at all, but in a optimistic and positive way. And if I cannot manage my life the way I want, if I cannot be doing what I need to do to feel fulfilled or happy or satisfied or whatever it is that I or anyone wants to feel, no one else is going to do it for me. So a lot of people, in my experience, are making, perhaps not quite making decisions, although many people are, but they're also asking themselves this question, am I on the path that I wish to be? And I think that's a healthy place to be. I don't think that's a midlife crisis. I prefer to use the term a midlife awakening. I can't remember, I heard a few years ago, I was listening to a song, and there was a line in the song which said, no one is promised tomorrow. And that's become a kind of mantra to me. No one is promised a tomorrow. And I fill that out by saying, so what am I going to do with the time I do have left, which is the time right here and right now? And of course, that brings me into the existential space. But as soon as I ask myself, and as soon as other people say, so what do I do with what's left of my one precious life? All the answers as to why you shouldn't have a future come up.
Mm,
I'm not
mm,
good enough. I'm not clever enough. I'm not tall enough. I'm not slim enough. I'm not fit enough. I'm not intelligent enough. All the injunctions, which I refer to as psychological detritus or even psychological propaganda, as to why we shouldn't be our own true selves and move forward. And that's what coaching's about. That's what existential coaching is about, helping people to unravel and find out the truth behind these statements and to decide what, if anything, they want to do about it.
mm.
I may have gone off on a bit of a ramble there.
No,
That
that's
sound
fine. That's what
okay?
this is about. Yeah, yeah, it's fine, mate. Yeah, we'll go on. We can go off whatever tangent you want, wherever this goes is absolutely fine. I said I've got notes and things like that, but really, it's just wherever this feels like it should go is wherever it should go. So I think for me, like circling back to one of the first things you said there, I think there seems to be this kind of like mocking, almost like a societal, like kind of like if you Google midlife crisis, it's generally the guy 40 something years old who's dyes his hair, gets a convertible, all that kind of thing. Why is that? Why is it something that? Because I think it's something that, in my experience and from speaking to other people, is super common. Why is it something that's almost like mocked and frowned upon so much?
That's a very good question. I don't know the absolute answer, but one of the things I've found over the years in my practice is that some of the people who are close to my clients in their life, whether it's parents, children, partners, friends, colleagues, have got an investment, usually an unconscious investment in keeping my coaching client right where they are, right here, right now. It's almost as if the client changes, if I change or if you change, we threaten other people in our environment. So they often it might be disguised. They often laugh at what we're doing or attempt to ridicule us or say, "Oh, come on," as I said earlier, pull yourself together, or you'll
Yeah,
get over it. Just give yourself time, and
yeah, I've
it'll
had a
all
bit of
get
that.
better. Yeah.
Yeah, I've had a bit of that.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's one of the big bugbears of existential counselling, that
Mm,
you need to be aware that if you change as a human being, even though you're doing what you want to do, which is your perfect right,
yeah.
it may upset the apple cart for other people in your life who may not want you to change because they then feel threatened with regards to their own equilibrium and
Mm.
where they are in their lives.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. It's almost like it's a mirror being held up to them, and that's a really uncomfortable thing for them to see as well. And I've had quite a bit of feedback like that in online as well from people, kind of almost like critical of sharing these things. And I've always just, well, as I've gone through it, I've kind of thought, well, that's a reflection on you. It's not a reflection on me. Um, and that's an interesting thing to notice. I think for me, if I go back, there's a number of things that were going on in my life, the business, personally. I think the thing you said at the start is, I when I turned 40, and that's just when I had Adeline, so I was like, quite a late dad. And then when I became a father, I became acutely aware of life and the limited nature of it all. But I think up until that point, up until the age of 40, I'd just been living life like, well, this is going to go on forever. Like, I'm still young. And then all of a sudden you're 40 years old and you've just had a child. So I think that was definitely one of the big triggers for me, is that realization of the days being numbered, um, which kind of makes sense, as you said, is why this is very common. Um, what This is a big question. This is a big question. So why is this even a thing? Why do so many people or why? Maybe that's like a confirmation bias because of the circumstance. Maybe it's not that many people, but why do any people get to this point of getting to the midpoint, or maybe whatever point in life, and then for me, realizing or recognizing that I'd kind of lived unconsciously, not to my truest self? Why do you think that could happen?
I think there are lots of different reasons for that. I don't think there's any one overall reason, but at some level it kind of makes sense. We're given a template. Society has got a template for what makes a successful life, and so everybody, or not everybody, some people do from the get-go decide, well, I'm not going to go down that route. But you get onto a particular treadmill where you grow up and you maybe get yourself into a long-term relationship, settle down with someone, perhaps you have children, and then in the UK, one of the big aspirational things is to get a mortgage, buy a house, and have lots of holidays abroad and have lots of nice possessions. I'm not knocking that, but that requires earning power. And so you get on the treadmill and you grind through it. And it's not until something happens, like COVID, where you sit back, you're forced perhaps to take a step back, and you realise, do you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. So something happens. That's a kind of universal example at the moment, because everyone who's watching this podcast has gone through COVID in some way or another. Hopefully, they haven't had too many ill effects, but often something happens. It could be you work for an organisation and there's a hostile takeover, and suddenly your career plan gets shredded and you're made redundant. And suddenly you think, what the hell am I going to do? I had a plan. I've got my mortgage, I've got my kids, I've got my house, I've got my holidays all planned, and I've got my career all mapped out. And suddenly, bang, it's gone. Something, and it could be an emotional thing. It might well be that you burn out. Someone really, there are some jobs and some organisations which seem to facilitate burnout more easily than others. Take the NHS at the moment. Now, I'm not suggesting the NHS is a bad employer. I'm suggesting we've had several bad governments who are systematically starving the NHS of much needed resources, and the burden then gets placed on every single member of the staff in any healthcare setting. And these people are tired. And a lot of them are they're thinking with their feet. They're saying, I can't do this anymore. So something actually happens. It could be a mental health crisis precipitated by pressure, or maybe a relationship breakup, having an accident. I don't know what, but something happens. I don't know specifically what I mean to say. Something happens which catalyzes reflection, where people say, do you know what? I'm on the wrong path. It's time to now think about what I do want to do, what is genuinely me for the rest of my life.
Yeah, amazing. So almost from that, kind of the thing that popped into my head is that maybe this reflective point is only possible at a certain point. Like, you could never have this reflective capacity when I was 20 years old, because I haven't lived enough life to gain that ability to reflect.
Yes. I mean, there are different catalysts. Some people do find out early, or earlier than others. You're never too late to find out, I hasten to add. But what happened for me was I realised in my early 20s that I was actually on a path which was heading towards self-destruction. And I thought, do I want to wipe myself out? Is that really, is that it? Is that what I want to do? And that's what catalysed me into what became my career today. I'm still working on my stuff. It's like going to the gym. I rock up to the gym for the very first time and I meet you and you tell me about this wonderful gym, and it genuinely has been a truly wonderful experience for me. But I've got to do the work. You can give me the training, the programs, the encouragement, and you can spot when I'm making a mistake and hopefully correct me. And that is absolutely been one of the most beneficial things I've experienced, but I have to do the work. I have to get the sweat. I have to lift the weights or whatever it is I'm doing. And it's the same with psychology. The coach can only point out directions, but the person who is in the role of the client has to do the work. For me, I'm still working on my shit 40 years on. I've now, a long time ago, I reached the conclusion I'll probably be working on this till I die, maybe even after I die, for all I know. But actually, I think one of the things that coaching, fitness coaching and psychological coaching has in common is once you realize it's the journey that's healing, not the outcome, it's a whole new ball game at that point.
Yeah, that's a big one, that is, for me, because I think a lot of a lot of fitness coaching traditionally, what you'd see is very outcome based. It's very like 9 week or 28-day program, whatever it is. You get fit, then that's it. And I think it sets people up to fail because it doesn't. You're okay.
I'm so sorry.
Don't worry about it, mate. Pat's got a bit of a cold, everyone. So,
Cold, yeah.
but he's still doing it. So I think that's one of my real issues with the fitness industry. And actually, I'm seeing it a lot still in kind of the space I'm moving into now, is that people kind of sell the idea that this isn't the physical and the mental side of it. It isn't a lifelong practice, when it is a lifelong thing. And the journey is never ending, isn't it? Like physical expression and no, like what do we call this kind of the journey you're on of like self-awareness or working on yourself, but there is no ultimate end point, and that's what you've got to start with, that on the front end, and go, well, there's no point where this is ever going to be finished. You'll be working on this forever, and maybe that scares people off. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, we live in a world of instant fixes.
Yeah.
And there aren't any. That's the bad news. There are no instant fixes. But if you do decide to walk the path of health, whether it's mental health and well-being or physical health and well-being, or hopefully both, the path becomes enjoyable once you realise that that's where it's at. And, like the physical gym, I notice how different I am now than physically fit in fitness terms than I was when I joined the gym in 2017. It's been a magical experience. And it's the same with psychology. You understand, you get to know yourself, and in a kind of a way, this may sound very woo-woo and off the wall, but actually one of the goals of humanistic psychology is to enable you to become your own best friend so that you look after your own well-being. And from that point, everything gets better.
That what you've said there, that your own best friend, is sharing some of my own experiences, and something I've delved into recently is like that relationship with self, and in particular the conversations I have with myself, and how critical I am of myself, and in such a way that you think if this conversation was expressed outwardly, people would like look at you like, "Can hell, what are you speaking to that person like that for?" So that really resonates with me. And what you've said there, I think there's something really aligned about the physical and the mental kind of side of this as well, and that they work hand in hand. Like, understanding your body, moving in space, and the practice of movement goes hand in hand with kind of the mental practice as well. And I think they work, they complement each other. I think they really do work with each other.
Absolutely.
So cool. So that's some big things we talked about there. Some big things. So going back to my notes, so this can happen for a number of reasons. I think for me there was a number of factors, but it was probably becoming acutely aware of my days being numbered and becoming mindful of that, and then recognizing that what I was doing professionally, although it was more probably even the police, my career in the police at certain points was fulfilling, owning the gym and stuff like that, but then recognizing that the gym was not fulfilling what I wanted to do as a coach. It really, the question that came up to me at that time is, well, should is it because what you've said is like what I've experienced is this kind of idea that maybe your career or your profession shouldn't be enjoyable. It should just be something that pays the bills and enables you to achieve X, Y, and Z. Where does that come from? Is that from like years gone? Where's that idea come from?
Yeah, it may well come from years gone, but it also can come from within oneself, where we may have, I know some people do have messages that I'm not worth anything more. I mean, that's a really self-destructive message to have. But most people have got negative messages embedded in their psyche, and they've often been there for a long while, and they inhibit their spontaneity, and they prevent us from living into our own potential, because at some level we don't feel good enough. And that's a real burden. That's a real burden for anyone to carry. One of the big benefits of the COVID pandemic, not to dishonour the suffering that people have experienced, but one of the benefits that I've noticed is it's become much more acceptable to talk about mental health issues. And once people talk about mental health issues more openly, the idea that they can get help for these things becomes apparent. So people do seek help, and that's good. It's not as widespread, in my opinion, as it needs to be, but of course I would say that, wouldn't I? But nonetheless, if we don't start looking after ourselves, then we carry that burden of, I'm using the term not being good enough, but it can be, as we said earlier, not tall enough, not fit enough, not clever enough, or whatever. It's what I term self-limiting beliefs, that somehow or other we are undeserving of better things. And that's really sad, really sad. We're all capable of more, but that's not an exhortation to work hard. It's more of an exhortation to ask yourself, what do I need to do to like myself a little bit better?
Yeah.
To look after myself some more. Now, there's also a term in psychology which is called inflation, which is where we puff ourselves up to be much bigger in our own mind than we actually are. Being your own best friend is not about inflation. If you want examples of inflation, think about the government.
Yeah.
There's plenty. There's a lot of them in there, and the opposition too, but the government gets more airtime. There's quite a lot of inflation, psychological inflation, not to mention physical inflation right at this point in time. That's an anchor. If you have self-limiting beliefs, you've got yourself tied down in some way, and you're being held back by these beliefs. Coaching enables you to question the efficacy of these beliefs and the validity, and hopefully helps you to make different decisions.
Yeah, that makes
more
sense.
positive decisions.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's almost I think that's the benefit of the coaching process, is having someone to go through these things with, because it's when you're trying to navigate this alone, it can, it's virtually impossible, isn't it? I think what you said, I think that's one thing, a big shift in post-COVID is people now are talking about their mental health more and stuff like that. And it's really, I guess, exactly why I'm doing this, is like sharing my own experience in a way that's really honest and vulnerable, not to like attract sympathy or to create this kind of like poor me thing. But I think, I don't know, the older I get, the more I kind of feel like we have a collective responsibility for the shared human experience.
Yeah.
And I just kind of thought on this the other day, like the more we talk about this, the more we can collectively improve the experience for everyone, because gone are the days where I feel like it's right to kind of like bury your head in the sand and say, well, don't talk about your problems. If you don't talk about them, they can't hurt you. I think, and especially being a parent now, the more we all stand up and go, okay, something's not quite right here. I think the better we'll all be.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
You feel free to say if you don't. You don't
worry,
I will. I know you will. So I guess if this is, there's a multitude of reasons why people could go through this, like this midlife crisis, with this period of reflection, midlife awakening. I think that's a great name for it, because I certainly don't feel. I mean, the experience of going through it at time was not pleasant, but out the other side of it, I feel more truly aligned with who I am, more in connection with who I am, and more able to experience joy and fulfillment, which is weird, but lovely. How would you tell people to start with this when they're going through it? Like, what would you say would be like simple principles of things to navigate that time?
That's a really big question. It's a big one, and it'll be different for different people. That's why I believe the existential approach for me is the best. So when people come to me, I say, "What's going on for you now?" And that can be right here, right now, in the interaction between me and them and me, or it can be what's going on in your life. And what do you want to happen? Where do you want to go with it? And then finally, what stops you? What's holding you back?
That makes sense. Yeah.
Now, it can take a while to tease out answers to those questions, but essentially that's it.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's not from what you were saying. It's not just like, we don't start with just focusing on the past. It's more like what's going on right now, and then from that you can start to build an idea of where you want to go. Yeah, that makes sense. Mm. 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 Yeah. One of the biggest things, I hope you know I'm sharing this, that you taught me in the last only 3 to 6 months is I think I was carrying a lot of guilt and shame for some of the things I did in the past. I think one of the things you said to me was like, you got to stop that and take responsibility, fully, own it, take responsibility, but stop with that guilt and shame. And then when that happens, you can start to move forward. Was that kind of what you said to me? Well, that's what I've taken from it.
Yeah. Because what happens is, the fact that the guilt bit keeps running means that there's still some sense of that's all my fault. If you can say that is all my fault, I did the best I could at that time. If you're going to confess to mass murder, it's not, you can't just say, okay, let's bypass that. But I'm talking about, the sins we commit either against ourselves or against other people. I find it helpful to allow myself to think I was doing the best I could at the time. But if the same situation arose again today, I'd like to think I would act differently in a more humane way towards me and the other people involved. Having said that, I accept responsibility for my involvement and my engagement in whatever happened in the past. And the important bit is to say, and I'm going to stop beating myself up about it. If I need to make amends, there are some approaches which suggest that it might be helpful to, if you've wounded another person emotionally, it might be helpful to say, I recognise that, and for what it's worth, I apologise. But that may not always be possible, and it may not always be the best course, especially if whatever you're talking about is still quite raw in the other person. You don't have to carry a wound for something that you can no longer change. That's in the past. What you can do is make a commitment for how you will behave towards yourself and others into the future.
Oh, that's a big one. That's a big one there. And I think that's what people need to hear, that, because I think for me especially, like those feelings of guilt and shame kind of compounded over the years and only amplified the the story of self-loathing I was telling myself, and the feeling of being less than. And I think that shift when we had that conversation, I started working through those things was really powerful. But I can see and feel that for other people, unless you have that awareness, those things kind of compound over the years and
Yes.
make it harder and harder to make better decisions or to think clearly, because you'll come from a place of really not liking the person you are.
Yeah.
It's not ideal.
Yeah.
It's not ideal.
No, it's not ideal.
Mm.
It's actually very damaging to not like the person you are.
Mm. Mm. I think that's. I think something can. Just in my experience in fitness coaching, I noticed that, and it's really one of the reasons I've moved more into the kind of coaching I like to do now. Is that I think people, like in my experience, would band-aid their actual self-loathing through kind of like punishment in fitness, or through thinking that, well, if I externally achieve a desirable body composition, I'll somehow be worthy. But underneath all that, you could still detect, and I was unable to kind of pull out from them the fact that they really didn't like the people they were. It's just,
Sure.
it was fitness was being used as a form of like self-flagellation, and then like a band-aid for the real problem that was going on.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, people have a preconceived picture of what success looks in fitness and in other fields. It's like I call it a template which society has given us. And, the reality is I'm never going to live up I'm never going to look like these people, because I'm not these people. I'm this person. And all I can do is try my best to look like myself and accept myself as I am. Once you get rid of the societal shoulds and oughts, these templates which tell us how to behave and etc., that's a sense of liberation. It is literally a kind of freedom, the freedom to decide our own future.
Yeah.
It's the best game in town.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And I think that's that for me, that idea of shedding the idea of the should. And I think it's quite funny, isn't it? That the when you think of success in society, if you think of what someone's deemed as successful, is that they are, materially very wealthy, and they generally have like power and control over other people. And it's, for me, I don't know, maybe we're on a different path, whatever it is, but that doesn't seem to me to be what success should be. But for some reason, it is.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. It's been like that for a long, long time.
Mm.
That's another podcast, and it might be political. So,
I'll get into that if you want, but yeah, we can save that for another time. But yeah, no, because and it's funny, you've hit it on the head. I can feel where that comes from, and the way we live, and why success is that way, and why success isn't, why the ideal version of success isn't like, being truly fulfilled inside, being truly connected to those around you, whatever it is that we think it actually might be, but it isn't that. But I can see why it is placed, why it is built as being those things. Cool. There's so many other things I want to talk about, but I'm conscious of your time, and I want to kind of wrap up with a couple of kind of small things, really. So yeah, it's hard because so the causes of this could be so broad and general, kind of like what you're saying, and then therefore how you navigate it is going to be so broad and general. But I think it's good to just have you here and to talk for a few of these things, and to share some of that. What it'd be good for just so you could maybe put it out there in the world. Like, what are you currently like working on at the moment? What's your kind of mission at the moment? Because I know you've got like a new website launch and a blog and some other things going on. So what's that?
back in the day when I started out in psychology, I used to participate in and run recovery retreats where people could learn to like themselves dare I say it, learn even to love themselves and to actually decide what path they truly wanted to be on. And so I've moved back to that. I've just got a new website, which is theshadowbehindthemask.co.uk, and there's a blog, and it's still the same old existential coaching that I offer, but I'm also going to be offering residential retreats to enable people to recover their personhood. And I'm quite excited about that. I'm hoping they will start later this year or perhaps early next year. It depends how popular the blog and the website becomes. So thanks for giving me the opportunity to mention it.
No, it's fine. What I'll do is I'll pop a link to your website below.
Lovely.
And I would guess if people want to find more information about those retreats, they would sign up to the list on the website. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. Drop me an email.
What can I ask you? Why is it? It sounds like it's something I don't know, thought of in fitness coaching, like something similar. Like you kind of circle back to where you started from, but you have a whole different viewpoint on it. Is that what's made you circle back to kind of where you started in that format?
Yeah, I think. Well, first of all, the memory of how much I enjoyed those workshops and those retreats, and seeing the benefits that the retreat participants in particular got from going through the process, and then acknowledging the journey I'd been on over the 40 years and the amount of different experiences that I've got to bring, and the memory of how enjoyable they were really is what catalysed me. It's, I'm sure you've heard me saying I've got the best job in the world, and I have. It's actually very, very enjoyable. But one of the biggest rewards is seeing people like flowering. It's like a seed becomes a bud, and then it opens, and people suddenly realise, hey, this is my life, and I'm going to do with it what I decide, not what other people do. So that kind of drove me. But I'm also, I'm not a young spring chicken anymore. I'm slowing down a bit, and that's enjoyable too. So I want to, for the rest of this career, I'm not going to be faffing about doing stuff which doesn't excite me or entice me. I want to be doing what I want to do with people who want to work with me.
Yeah.
I hope that doesn't sound too selfish. It's not intended
no,
to be.
Absolutely. No, it's fine. No, I think it's fine. Like, no, it absolutely doesn't sound selfish. The idea of seeing people get to that point, I don't think there's anything selfish in that. Something I've just been reading about recently is this concept of ikigai, which is like a Japanese principle of, like, I don't know, mastery or whatever, but something that kind of runs through this idea is that when you have the thing you love doing, there doesn't seem like there's ever going to be an end point to it.
Yeah.
And I guess it seems like that seems to apply to you. Like this is what you love doing, and you're going to continue doing it.
Yeah, I'm going to continue doing it as long as I possibly can. And so, and I do love doing it. I'm even enjoying writing my blog posts. I find that quite challenging, but hopefully I'll become a better writer through the process. But it's very enjoyable. It's a bit I'm not trying to be flippant. My wife loves working in her garden because she plants things, she tends to them, and she sees them growing and emerging. Well, I suppose if I wanted to be mildly flippant, I could say I'm a psychic gardener. I like to see people planting their own seeds about their own self, their own self-worth, improving and nurturing their own self-belief, and moving from a place of, to some extent, self-alienation into self-love and being their own best friend. What could possibly be better than that?
No, I'm with you. And I think you that analogy is a really good one to use, because I think what I've, in my own limited experience of coaching, is that you've got to let the process kind of happen and nurture, and there's a certain you've got to allow that. You've got to allow it to happen in a certain way. You can't kind of force it, can you?
Yeah. And some of the process of coaching will involve grieving for all the times that we ignored ourselves or we didn't pay attention to ourselves. So I don't want to give people the idea that it's a happy clappy type thing. Actually, it can be quite hard work, and it can be quite challenging. But actually, if the end point is that you come to a place of self-acceptance and self-love, what's not to like about that?
Yeah, no, I think that's really important to say as well, because I think there is this belief, isn't there, now that again, in all realms of coaching, is that somehow you can get to this point of wherever it is you want to be, and there's not going to be some difficulty getting there, but there's challenge and there's discomfort and there's pain in the process, but that's part of the course, isn't it, I guess?
Someone in the Gestalt fraternity described it as the good pain, and I accept that. It's the good pain because at the end of it there is transformation. Self-directed, self-chosen, self-initiated transformation.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. All right, Pat. Well, thank you. I've kind of run through my little list. I think we've had a good chat there today. Is there anything else you want to say, or kind of all good?
All good, yeah. Thank you for asking me. I've enjoyed the process much more than I anticipated.
Yeah, no, I've really enjoyed it too. I'm so glad that you were the first person I've had on here to do this, because I was so nervous about it. But after the initial nerves of a few minutes, it's just felt like one of our normal chats. That's good. So, right, thank you so much, Pat. I'm going to I'll press stop now, and we'll still be online, so we'll catch up in a second. But I'll just press stop on the record. Take care.
Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to the podcast with me today. I just wanted to say I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy life to listen to me. And if you found value in it, please subscribe to the channel. And if there's anyone you know who would benefit from listening to this, please share the podcast and help others who may be going through this. Thank you so much.